The crash landing. Marcus Webb pressed his face against the small porthole of the transport ship Meridian as it shuddered violently through the atmosphere of an unknown world. The 34-year-old terraforming engineer had been traveling to the frontier colony of New Byzantium when pirates attacked their convoy. In the chaos, the Meridian had been forced to make an emergency jump through folded space, only to emerge with critical systems failing above this uncharted planet. "Brace for impact," Captain Reeves shouted over the screaming alarms. Marcus gripped his safety harness as the ship tore through thick purple clouds, its hull glowing white-hot from atmospheric entry. Through the porthole, he glimpsed an alien landscape of crystalline forests and vast meadows of silver grass before the ground rushed up to meet them. The crash was catastrophic. Marcus awoke hours later, hanging upside down in his restraints, blood trickling from a gash on his forehead. The acrid smell of burning electronics filled his nostrils. Around him, the passenger compartment was a twisted maze of metal and sparking cables. Of the 43 souls aboard the Meridian, Marcus appeared to be the only survivor. His emergency kit contained basic medical supplies, a portable fusion cell, some rations, and a short-range communicator that picked up nothing but static. The ship's main computer was dead, its quantum drives completely destroyed. Marcus was stranded on an alien world with no way to contact Earth or any human colony. First contact with the Veltharians. Marcus spent 3 days making a shelter from wreckage and exploring the immediate area. The planet was beautiful but alien, with 2 small suns that cast everything in golden and amber light. The crystalline trees chimed softly in the wind, creating haunting melodies that seemed almost intelligent. Strange flowers glowed with bioluminescent patterns, and the air tasted of cinnamon and ozone. On the 4th day they found him. Marcus was collecting water from a nearby stream when he heard soft, musical voices speaking in an unknown language. He looked up to see 3 beings emerging from the crystal forest, moving with careful, deliberate steps. They stood about 4 feet tall with slender bodies covered in bark-like skin that shifted from deep brown to soft green depending on the light. Their faces were surprisingly expressive, with large amber eyes and small mouths that seemed designed more for communication than consumption. The lead being raised one hand in what Marcus hoped was a peaceful gesture. When it spoke, the words came out in a series of musical tones that reminded Marcus of wind chimes. The being seemed to understand that Marcus couldn't comprehend them, because it pointed to itself and said something that sounded like Zin. "Marcus," he replied, pointing to his own chest. The being repeated his name with perfect pronunciation, then gestured for him to follow. Welcome among the tree singers. The Veltharian settlement was unlike anything Marcus had ever seen. Their homes were grown rather than built, shaped from living crystal trees that had been coaxed into hollow forms over many years. Walkways spiraled around massive trunks, connecting dozens of dwellings in a 3-dimensional community that seemed to be part of the forest itself. Elder Zin, as Marcus learned to call his rescuer, led him to a healing chamber where other Veltharians tended to his wounds with techniques that seemed to blend medicine with music. They sang over his injuries, and Marcus felt the pain fading as his cuts healed with impossible speed. Their touch was gentle, almost reverent, as if they considered all life sacred. Over the following weeks, Marcus learned to communicate with the Veltharians through a combination of gestures, drawings, and their remarkable ability to learn. They were incredibly intelligent, with a natural gift for languages and technology. Several of them began picking up basic English within days, while Marcus struggled to master even simple phrases in their musical tongue. The Veltharians called themselves the Kethmani, which roughly translated to tree singers or those who grow in harmony. Their entire civilization was built around cooperation and mutual support. They had no concept of war or violence, settling disputes through meditation and consensus. Their technology was biological, using living organisms to accomplish tasks that humans would need machines for. Learning of the threat, 3 weeks after his rescue, Marcus learned why the Veltharians lived in such hidden settlements. Elder Zin brought him to the community's central grove, where the oldest and largest crystal tree served as both meeting hall and data repository. The tree's trunk was hollow, its inner walls covered with bioluminescent patterns that recorded The history of the Kethmani people. Through a combination of the living images and Zin's halting English, Marcus learned about the Krovar Empire. The Krovar were an aggressive species that had conquered dozens of worlds in this region of space. They were warriors who valued strength above all else, seeing peaceful species like the Veltharians as weak creatures to be exploited. For the past 50 years, the Krovar had demanded tribute from Velthara. Every few months, their ships would arrive to collect payments of precious metals, rare crystals, and biological specimens. The Veltharians had no choice but to comply. Their pacifist nature meant they had no weapons, no military, and no way to resist the Krovar's demands. "We give them what they want," Zin explained in his careful English. "They leave us in peace. It is, what is your word? Survival." Marcus felt his blood boil as he looked at the records of Krovar visits. The images showed massive, brutal-looking aliens in powered armor terrorizing communities like this one, taking whatever they wanted, and sometimes killing Veltharians just to demonstrate their power. These gentle people had been living under this threat for decades, too kind and peaceful to fight back. The engineers promised that night Marcus made a decision that would change the fate of both species. He approached Elder Zin in the sacred grove, carrying his portable fusion cell and some basic tools he'd salvaged from the Meridian. "Zin," he said carefully, "I want to help you. My people, humans, we know how to fight. We know how to protect ourselves and others. Will you let me teach you?" The elderly Veltharian studied Marcus with those large amber eyes. "Teach us to hurt others?" "No," Marcus replied firmly. "Teach you to defend yourselves. To be strong so the Krovar can't hurt you anymore." Zin was quiet for a long time, his bark-like skin shifting through various shades as he considered. Finally, he spoke. "The Kethmani do not fight. It is not our way. But—" he gestured to the historical records glowing around them. "Perhaps it is time our way changed. Building hope." Over the next several months, Marcus worked tirelessly to help the Veltharians improve their defenses. He couldn't teach them to be warriors, but he could help them be smarter about survival. Using his engineering knowledge, he showed them how to build early warning systems using their natural biotechnology. They grew sensor networks from modified plants that could detect approaching spacecraft days before they arrived. Marcus helped them design hidden shelters that could protect their most vulnerable citizens during Krovar visits. He taught them about electromagnetic shielding and how to hide their most advanced technology from Krovar scanners. The Veltharians proved to be incredibly adaptable students. Their biological technology, combined with Marcus's engineering principles, created innovations that neither species could have achieved alone. They developed camouflaged settlements that were nearly invisible from orbit, communication networks that used quantum-entangled spores, and storage systems that could hide entire cities underground at a moment's notice. Marcus also worked on a project of his own. Using components from the crashed Meridian, he slowly built a quantum communication array powerful enough to reach human space. It would take time to complete, and he would only get one chance to use it before the power ran out, but it represented hope for both species. A growing family. As the seasons passed, Marcus found himself becoming part of the Veltharian community in ways he never expected. The Kethmani had a concept they called soul bonding, a form of adoption that made outsiders into family members. Elder Zin formally inducted Marcus into their community during a beautiful ceremony, where the entire settlement sang his name into the crystal trees, making him a permanent part of their living history. Marcus learned their philosophy of interconnected life, where every action affected the whole community. In return, he shared human concepts of individuality and personal determination. The exchange enriched both cultures, creating new ways of thinking that neither species had possessed before. Young Veltharians would sit for hours listening to Marcus tell stories about Earth, about cities that scraped the sky, and oceans that stretched beyond the horizon. In return, they taught him to hear the songs of the crystal forests and to understand the complex relationships that kept their ecosystem in perfect balance. Marcus began to think of Velthara as his home. The settlement where he lived had become His family and these gentle people had risked everything to save a complete stranger. He was determined to repay that kindness, no matter what it cost him. The approaching storm. 8 months after his arrival, Marcus's early warning network detected the familiar energy signature of Krovar ships approaching the system. This would be the first tribute collection since his arrival, and he knew the Krovar would immediately notice the improvements to Veltharian technology. "They come again," Elder Zinn said sadly as they watched the distant contacts on Marcus's improvised display. "Every time they take more. Every time they hurt more of our people." Marcus looked at his quantum communicator, still incomplete but tantalizingly close to being functional. He had perhaps 3 days before the Krovar arrived. 3 days to finish a project that represented the only hope for his adopted family. "Zinn," he said quietly, "I need you to trust me. I'm going to try something dangerous, but if it works, your people might never have to fear the Krovar again." The elder Veltharian placed a gentle hand on Marcus's shoulder. "You have already given us more hope than we have had in 50 years, my friend. We trust you completely." As the Krovar ships grew larger on his sensors, Marcus worked with desperate intensity to complete his communication array. He had one message to send, one chance to call for help from across the galaxy. The Veltharians had saved him when he was alone and helpless. Now it was time to see if humanity would answer when he called for help to save them. The fate of an entire gentle species hung in the balance, and Marcus Webb was their only hope of survival. The Krovar tribute fleet. The 3 Krovar warships descended through Velthara's atmosphere like falling meteors, their black hulls scarred from countless battles across the galaxy. Marcus watched from a hidden observation post as the massive vessels settled onto the crystal plains outside the main Veltharian settlement. Each ship was easily 10 times larger than the crashed Meridian, bristling with weapon turrets and sensor arrays that spoke of a civilization built entirely around conquest and domination. From his concealed position in the crystal trees, Marcus got his first clear look at the Krovar themselves. They stood nearly 8 feet tall, with thick gray skin covered in natural armor plates. Their faces were brutally angular, with small red eyes and mouths filled with sharp teeth designed for tearing flesh. They moved with the confident swagger of predators who had never encountered anything they couldn't kill or intimidate. The Krovar commander, distinguished by additional armor plating and scars that covered half his face, surveyed the assembled Veltharians with obvious contempt. When he spoke, his voice was a harsh growl that carried clearly across the meadow. "I am War Leader Grax of the Krovar 3rd Fleet," he announced. "You will provide the tribute as agreed, or this world will burn." Elder Zinn stepped forward with remarkable courage, his bark-like skin pale with fear but his voice steady. "We have prepared the tribute, honored War Leader. As always, we seek only peace between our peoples." Suspicious eyes Grax studied the Veltharian settlement with the calculating gaze of a career soldier. Marcus held his breath as the Krovar commander's red eyes swept across the landscape, taking in details that hadn't been there during previous visits. The hidden sensor networks, the subtly reinforced structures, the tiny technological improvements that Marcus had helped implement over the past months. "Something is different here," Grax rumbled, his hand moving instinctively to the plasma rifle at his side. "Your dwellings show signs of technological advancement. Your people seem less afraid than usual." Elder Zinn maintained his composure admirably. "We have learned to better adapt to our environment, War Leader. Surely the mighty Krovar do not object to efficiency?" But Grax was not satisfied. He barked orders in his harsh native tongue, and Krovar soldiers began spreading throughout the settlement. They moved with military precision, scanning structures and questioning Veltharians with increasing aggression. Marcus realized with growing dread that his improvements to their defenses had been too successful. The Krovar were trained to notice any change that might threaten their dominance. One of the Krovar soldiers approached Grax and spoke in rapid, guttural tones. Marcus didn't understand the language, but the soldier's body language was clear enough. They had found evidence of human technology. The interrogation begins. Grax's expression darkened as he listened to his subordinate's report. He turned back to Elder Zinn with naked suspicion written across his scarred features. My soldiers tell me they have detected energy signatures consistent with foreign technology, he growled. Technology that is not Krovar, and certainly not the primitive biosystems you have always used. Explain this. Zin's skin shifted through several shades of distress, but he maintained his peaceful demeanor. I do not understand, war leader. We use only what grows from our world as we always have. Lies, Grax snarled. He gestured to two of his soldiers, massive brutes in powered armor who grabbed Elder Zin roughly by the arms. Search everything. Find the source of this technology, and if these tree singers are harboring outsiders. He left the threat unfinished, but his meaning was crystal clear. Marcus watched in horror as Krovar soldiers began tearing through the Veltharian settlement. They overturned carefully tended gardens, smashed delicate crystal sculptures, and terrorized families who had never known violence. The sight of these gentle people being brutalized by alien thugs filled Marcus with a rage he had never experienced before. A test of loyalty. The search continued for hours. The Krovar found Marcus's hidden workshop, discovered components from the Meridian, and detected energy residue from his quantum communicator. When they dragged these items before Grax, the war leader's expression shifted from suspicion to predatory satisfaction. Human technology, he stated with certainty. These energy patterns are consistent with Earth engineering. You are harboring a human, aren't you? Elder Zin said nothing, but his silence was answer enough. Grax nodded to his soldiers, who immediately began beating the elderly Veltharian with their rifle butts. Zin fell to his knees, his bark-like skin cracking under the brutal assault. But he made no sound of pain or protest. Where's the human? Grax demanded. Surrender this alien to us, and your people will be spared additional punishment. Despite the blood flowing from his wounds, Zin looked up at the Krovar commander with unbroken dignity. We do not abandon those who seek our protection, he said quietly. This is not our way. Grax's laugh was a sound like breaking glass. Your way will get you all killed, old fool. He turned to address the assembled Veltharians, his voice carrying across the settlement. You have 1 day to produce this human. If you do not comply, we will begin executing your people one by one until either the alien surrenders or your entire settlement is dead. The impossible choice. Hidden in his observation post, Marcus watched the Krovar soldiers drag Elder Zin to the center of the settlement and chain him to a crystal tree. Other Veltharians who had tried to intervene were beaten and imprisoned alongside him. The remaining citizens huddled together in small groups, their musical voices raised in soft harmonies that Marcus had learned were prayers for strength and wisdom. As night fell, Marcus made his way carefully through the crystal forest to where several Veltharian leaders had gathered in secret. They had found a way to communicate without the Krovar detecting them, using spore-based networks that carried messages through the tree roots. Marcus, whispered researcher Neth, a young Veltharian who had become one of his closest friends. You must leave. Find a way off this world. The Krovar will kill us all if they discover you. I won't abandon you, Marcus replied firmly. Zin is suffering because of me. All of you are in danger because you chose to help a stranger. And we would make the same choice again, said Healer Vyra, her amber eyes glowing with fierce determination. The Cathamani do not purchase safety with betrayal. We will protect you even if it costs us everything. Marcus felt his heart breaking as he looked at these incredible beings who were willing to die rather than surrender someone they barely knew. They had shown him what true civilization looked like, what it meant to value life and kindness above personal safety. Now he was going to lose them all unless he could find a miracle. A desperate gambit, Marcus returned to his hidden workshop and stared at his quantum communicator. It was 90% complete, but the remaining work would take days he didn't have. The power requirements were enormous, and he had calculated that he would have perhaps 30 seconds of transmission time before the fusion cell burned out completely. 30 seconds to send a message across half the galaxy, 30 seconds to explain the situation and call for help. It wasn't enough time for a detailed report, barely enough for coordinates and a basic distress signal, but it was all he had. Working through the night by the light of bioluminescent fungi, Marcus finished the quantum array using every trick he had learned in 20 years of engineering. He cannibalized components from his medical kit, his survival gear, even his clothing synthesizer to provide the final circuit connections. As dawn broke over Velthara, casting the crystal forests in golden light, Marcus powered up his communicator, for the first and last time. The device hummed with barely contained energy, its improvised components glowing white-hot as they channeled forces that could tear reality itself. The message. Marcus activated the quantum transmission at exactly 0800 local time, hoping to catch Earth's communication networks during peak monitoring hours. The signal burst outward at faster-than-light speeds, carrying his desperate plea across the vast emptiness between stars. Earth Command, this is Engineer Marcus Webb, identification number 77 Alpha 9 Delta. He spoke rapidly into the transmitter. I am stranded on an uncharted world in the Kepler 442 system. The local population saved my life and gave me shelter. They are now facing genocide from the Terran Empire because they protected me. These people are peaceful, intelligent, and deserve our protection. The Terran are planning to execute civilians unless I surrender. I'm sending all available data on Veltharian culture and Terran military capabilities. Please, if anyone receives this message, remember that we owe these people everything. Don't let them die because they showed mercy to one of ours. The transmission lasted 28 seconds before the fusion cell overloaded in a cascade of sparks and smoke. The communicator was completely destroyed, its components fused into unrecognizable slag. Marcus had no way of knowing if his message had reached Earth, or if anyone would even care about the fate of an unknown alien species on the far side of the galaxy. The final ultimatum. At noon, war leader Grax assembled his forces for what he clearly intended to be the final confrontation. The Terran had positioned their ships in a triangle around the Veltharian settlement, their weapons trained on the crystalline structures that housed thousands of innocent civilians. Your day of grace is ended, Grax announced, his amplified voice echoing across the crystal plains. Produce the human now, or watch your people die. Elder Zin, still chained to the crystal tree despite his injuries, raised his head with remarkable dignity. We will not betray one who sought our protection, he said clearly. If this is how we must die, then we die with honor. Grax drew his plasma rifle and aimed it at Zin's head. So be it. Your deaths will serve as an example to other worlds that defy the Terran Empire. Marcus stood up from his hiding place in the crystal forest. He couldn't let these people die for him. He couldn't let their kindness be repaid with extinction. If he had to surrender himself to save them, then that was what he would do. But as he stepped into the clearing, ready to call out to the Terran commander, something extraordinary happened. The sky above Velthara suddenly filled with new stars, brilliant points of light that hadn't been there moments before. The human fleet had arrived. Ships of Earth. Marcus looked up in wonder as massive Earth warships materialized out of folded space, their hulls gleaming in the light of Velthara's twin suns. He counted dozens of vessels, more human military power than he had ever seen in one place. Dreadnoughts and carriers, destroyers and support craft, all bearing the blue and gold insignia of the United Earth Defense Force. The lead ship, a massive battlecruiser that dwarfed even the largest Terran vessel, descended through the atmosphere with majesty that took Marcus's breath away. As it settled onto the crystal plains, its landing thrusters carving geometric patterns in the silver grass, Marcus could see the name painted on its hull in bold letters. UES Defiance. War leader Grax stared at the human fleet with an expression of disbelief and growing rage. Impossible, he snarled. This system is beyond human space. How did they find you? Marcus stepped fully into the clearing, no longer hiding from the Terran soldiers. Because that's what humans do, he said loudly. Enough for everyone to hear. We protect our friends, we honor our debts, and we never ever abandon those who show us kindness. The age of Terran dominance over Velthara was about to end, and Marcus Webb was going to be there to see it happen. The fleet of Earth. The main docking bay of the UES Defiance opened with mechanical precision, and from within emerged two figures, who would forever change the course of galactic history. Admiral Sarah Chen, Earth's foremost expert in first contact protocols, walked with diplomatic grace despite wearing full military dress uniform. Beside her strode Admiral Carlos Rodriguez, commander of the Third Fleet and a veteran of humanity's expansion wars against hostile species. Marcus felt tears streaming down his face as he watched his own kind emerge from the massive warship. Behind the two admirals came a full honor guard of Earth Marines, their powered armor gleaming in the amber sunlight of Velthara. The sight of human soldiers on this distant world filled him with pride and hope he had thought lost forever. War leader Grax recovered from his initial shock with the practiced composure of a career military commander. He barked orders in the Krovar tongue, and his soldiers immediately took defensive positions around their ships. Plasma rifles powered up with ominous whines, and heavy weapons turrets swiveled to track the newly arrived human vessels. "I am War Leader Grax of the Krovar Empire," he announced, his voice amplified across the crystal plains. "This world pays tribute to the Krovar. You humans have no business here." Admiral Chen stepped forward, her translator device allowing her words to be understood by all present. "I am Admiral Sarah Chen of the United Earth Defense Force. We received a distress signal from one of our citizens, Engineer Marcus Webb, requesting protection for the native population of this world." She gestured toward the chained Elder Zen and the other imprisoned Veltharians. "We observe that peaceful civilians are being held hostage and threatened with execution. This is unacceptable behavior under any civilized standard." The Krovar response, Grax's scarred face twisted into an expression of contempt and rage. "This human is a fugitive who has interfered with lawful tribute collection. These tree singers have harbored a criminal and violated their agreement with the Krovar Empire." "What agreement?" Admiral Rodriguez asked, stepping up beside his diplomatic counterpart. His voice carried the harsh edge of someone who had spent decades fighting to protect human colonies from aggressive aliens. "We've reviewed our databases, War Leader. The Krovar Empire has no legal claim to this world under any interstellar treaty." Marcus watched the exchange with growing amazement. Earth Command had not only received his message, they had researched the situation thoroughly before dispatching this massive fleet. The response was everything he could have hoped for and more. Grax drew himself up to his full 8-foot height, his natural armor plates flaring with aggressive display patterns. "Legal claim? We claim this world by right of conquest, human. The strong rule the weak. This is the natural order." Admiral Chen's expression remained diplomatically neutral, but Marcus could see the steel beneath her polite facade. "The United Earth government does not recognize conquest as a legitimate basis for sovereignty. We offer the Krovar Empire one chance to withdraw peacefully and cease all hostile actions against the population of Velthara." "And if we refuse?" Grax snarled. Admiral Rodriguez smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. "Then we demonstrate why humanity has never lost a war to species that prey on peaceful civilians." The Battle of Velthara. The Krovar response was swift and predictable. Grax raised his plasma rifle and fired directly at Admiral Chen, the bolt of superheated energy streaking across the crystal plains with lethal intent. The shot never reached its target. Point defense systems on the UES Defiance intercepted the plasma bolt with precision that spoke of technological superiority beyond the Krovar's comprehension. "All Krovar vessels," Admiral Rodriguez announced over all frequencies. "You have initiated hostilities against a diplomatic mission under a flag of truce. You are hereby designated as hostile combatants." The human fleet responded with overwhelming force. Energy beams lanced out from Earth warships, striking Krovar vessels with surgical precision. The alien shields, designed to deflect the primitive weapons of subjugated species, proved worthless against human military technology. Within minutes, all 3 Krovar ships were crippled, their weapon systems destroyed, and their engines dead. But the ground battle was just beginning. Krovar soldiers opened fire on the assembled Veltharians, apparently determined to complete their massacre even if it meant their own destruction. Marcus watched in horror as plasma bolts streaked toward Elder Zin and the other prisoners. The bolts never found their targets. Human Marines materialized around the Veltharians in flashes of blue light, their personal teleportation systems allowing them to deploy instantly wherever needed. Advanced armor absorbed the Krovar weapons fire, while returning precisely aimed. shots that disabled rather than killed their attackers. The battle lasted less than 10 minutes. When the smoke cleared, every Krovar soldier was either dead or immobilized, their weapons destroyed and their arrogant commander lying unconscious in the silver grass of Velthara. Liberation and reunion. Marcus ran toward Elder Zin as human medics, carefully released the elderly Veltharian from his chains. The sight of his adoptive father's injuries filled Marcus with rage and grief, but Zin's first words were not about his suffering. "Marcus, my child," Zin whispered in accented English, "your people came. They came for us." "Of course they did," Marcus replied, gently supporting the injured elder. "That's what families do for each other." Admiral Chen approached them with respectful caution, clearly aware that she was witnessing something historically significant. "Engineer Webb," she said formally, "on behalf of Earth Command and the United Earth Government, I want to express our gratitude for your service and our apologies that it took so long to reach you." Marcus looked around at the crystal settlement where he had found a new home and a new family. Veltharian children were emerging from hiding places to stare in wonder at the human soldiers. Adults who had moments before faced certain death now wept with relief and joy. The oppressive presence of the Krovar had been lifted forever. "Admiral," Marcus said quietly, "these people saved my life when they had no reason to help me. They protected me even when it meant facing extinction. I need you to understand that they're not just aliens to me, they're my family." Chen nodded with genuine understanding. "That's exactly why we're here, Engineer. Earth doesn't abandon family." The Velthara Accords. 3 days later, the crystal amphitheater that served as the Veltharian Council chamber hosted the most important diplomatic ceremony in the planet's history. Representatives from dozens of human colonies had arrived via quantum communication, while every major Veltharian settlement on the planet sent delegates to witness the historic moment. Admiral Chen stood at the center of the amphitheater, her dress uniform immaculate as she read from a document that would reshape galactic politics. Beside her, Elder Zin represented his people with dignity despite his healing injuries. "By the authority granted to me by the United Earth Government and the Colonial Council," Chen announced, her words echoing through the crystal chamber, "I hereby establish the Velthara Protection Accords. The planet Velthara and all its inhabitants are placed under the formal protection of the United Earth Defense Force." The agreement was unprecedented in human history. For the first time, Earth was extending its military protection to an alien species not as a client state or colony, but as equal partners deserving of safety and self-determination. "Any hostile action against Veltharian citizens or territory," Chen continued, "will be considered an act of war against Earth itself. The Veltharian people will retain complete sovereignty over their world and culture, while Earth provides security guarantees and technological assistance." Elder Zin stepped forward to add the Veltharian perspective. "The Kethmani accept this partnership with gratitude and joy. We pledge to share our knowledge and wisdom with humanity, and to work together for the benefit of all peaceful species in the galaxy." A new beginning. Months later, Marcus stood on the observation deck of the New Earth Embassy, watching as human and Veltharian workers collaborated to build a spaceport that would serve as a hub for peaceful trade and cultural exchange. The crystal trees chimed in harmony with the sound of human construction equipment, creating a symphony that represented the merger of two very different civilizations. The Krovar Empire had withdrawn from the entire sector after learning of Earth's intervention. Word had spread quickly through galactic communication networks that humanity would fight to protect innocent species, regardless of strategic value or economic benefit. Other aggressive civilizations began reconsidering their policies toward weaker neighbors, knowing that Earth's protection might extend to any species that showed kindness to humans. The ripple effect. Admiral Chen had returned to Earth to brief the Colonial Council on the implications of the Velthara Accords, but Admiral Rodriguez remained as military commander of the new sector defense fleet. Marcus often found himself serving as an unofficial liaison between human and Veltharian cultures, helping both species understand each other's perspectives and customs. "Marcus," Elder Zin said as they walked together through the crystal gardens that surrounded the embassy. Do you ever regret the crash that brought you to our world? Marcus considered the question carefully. A year ago, he had been just another terraforming engineer, focused on turning dead worlds into human colonies. The crash of the Meridian had seemed like a catastrophe, the end of his career and possibly his life. Instead, it had led him to discover what true civilization looked like and had sparked the first formal alliance between humanity and a peaceful alien species. No, he said finally. That crash brought me home. It brought me to my real family. Zin's bark-like skin shifted to the warm golden color that indicated deep happiness. And it brought your people to ours. The Kethmani no longer fear the darkness between stars. We know that somewhere in that vastness, friends are watching over us. Letters from Earth. Marcus received regular communications from Earth through the new quantum relay network. His former colleagues in the terraforming corps had been amazed by his reports on Veltharian biotechnology. Several research teams were already planning joint expeditions to study how the Kethmani had achieved perfect ecological balance on their world. More importantly, the Velthara Accords had inspired similar protection agreements with 3 other peaceful species that had contacted Earth seeking help against aggressive neighbors. Humanity was rapidly becoming known throughout the galaxy not as conquerors, but as protectors of the innocent. His sister Jenny had written to tell him that the story of his rescue and the Veltharian response had become required reading at the Diplomatic Academy on Earth. New generations of human ambassadors were learning that the greatest achievements in interstellar relations came not from demonstrations of power, but from acts of simple kindness between species. A growing family. The Veltharian population had exploded since the end of Krovar oppression. Without the constant threat of tribute collection and random violence, the Kethmani could focus their energies on growth and exploration. Young Veltharians who had never known freedom were venturing beyond their hidden settlements to reclaim vast areas of their world that had been abandoned during the long years of subjugation. Marcus had been formally adopted into Elder Zin's family line, a ceremony that made him legally and spiritually a member of the Kethmani people. He wore a living crystal pendant that grew from his skin, marking him as one of the tree singers for anyone who knew their customs. The integration went both ways. Several human families had relocated to Velthara, and their children were learning to speak both English and the musical Veltharian language. Dr. Sarah Martinez, the xenobiologist assigned to the embassy, had made breakthrough discoveries about Veltharian longevity treatments that could potentially benefit both species. The Kethmani lived for over 400 years, their biological processes slowing gracefully as they aged. Early research suggested that human lifespans could be significantly extended using modified Veltharian techniques. The wider galaxy. As Marcus reviewed the latest intelligence reports in his role as cultural liaison, he was struck by how much the galaxy had changed in just 1 year. The Velthara Accords had created a new model for interstellar relations, one based on mutual protection rather than exploitation. The hegemony of Zrix, a militaristic empire that had been expanding aggressively for decades, had suddenly halted their conquest campaigns. Their leadership had apparently decided that the risk of encountering human-protected species was too great to justify continued expansion. Several worlds that had been marked for invasion were now sending delegations to Earth, seeking protection agreements of their own. More surprisingly, some of the species that had been clients or vassals of aggressive empires were beginning to rebel, inspired by the Veltharian example. They had seen that it was possible to be free, that there were species in the galaxy willing to fight for justice rather than profit. A message of hope. On the first anniversary of his rescue, Marcus stood before a gathering that would have seemed impossible just 1 year earlier. The Crystal Amphitheater held not only Veltharians and humans, but representatives from 6 other species that had signed protection agreements with Earth. The Gentle Shepherds of Kepler 438c, the Crystal Dancers of Wolf 359, the Dream Weavers of Proxima Centauri, all had found safety under Earth's protective wing. A year ago, Marcus began, his words translated into dozens of languages and communication methods. I was a stranger stranded on an unknown world. The people of Velthara could have ignored me, could have feared me, could have turned me away to protect themselves. Instead, they welcomed me as family. He looked out at the diverse crowd, seeing the hope in their eyes as they listened to his words. That single act of kindness changed everything. It showed my people what true civilization looks like. It taught us that the measure of a species is not how much power they wield, but how they treat those who cannot defend themselves. Elder Zinn stepped forward to add his perspective. Marcus Webb came to us as a stranger and became our son. His people came to us as unknowns and became our protectors. This is how the galaxy should work, not through fear and conquest, but through friendship and mutual aid. The future among the stars. As the ceremony concluded and the diverse gathering began to mingle, Marcus reflected on the strange path that had brought him to this moment. He had started as an engineer whose job was to transform dead worlds into copies of Earth. Now he was helping to transform the galaxy itself into something better than it had ever been before. Young Veltharians played with human children in the crystal gardens, their laughter creating harmonies that seemed to make the very air sparkle with joy. Scientists from a dozen species compared notes on discoveries that could benefit all their civilizations. Diplomats who had once feared for their world's survival now planned joint missions to explore distant stars together. The crash of the Meridian had seemed like a random accident, a stroke of terrible luck that had stranded him among aliens. But Marcus now understood that it had been something far more important, the first note in a symphony of cooperation that would echo through the galaxy for generations to come. As the twin suns of Velthara set behind the crystal mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and amber, Marcus Webb smiled at the family he had found among the stars. The Kethmani had a saying, "The tree that shelters strangers will find its roots strengthened by their gratitude." Earth had learned that lesson well, and the galaxy would never be the same. Epilogue. The legend grows. 5 years later, the Marcus Webb Foundation for Interstellar Protection had established embassy compounds on 47 worlds, each one protecting peaceful species from aggressive neighbors. The Foundation's motto, inscribed in crystal and metal in the lobby of every embassy, captured the spirit that had started with one stranded engineer and one act of alien kindness. They sheltered one human. Now their planet is under Earth's protection. No act of kindness toward humanity will ever be forgotten. No species that shows mercy to our people will ever stand alone. The galaxy had learned a new lesson about humanity, that Earth's children remembered their debts and repaid kindness with loyalty that would last for generations. In a universe full of predators and empires built on conquest, one species had chosen to be protectors instead of conquerors. And it all began with a gentle people who chose to save a stranger, simply because it was the right thing to do.